Oh, but not your friends are they gonna feel low down? Will they ever be around? Will they turn their backs on you? Sure, that's not the praise and worship selection that y'all thought y'all were getting today, but hey, that's what it is. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Save Black Girl Reads, where I am your host, Ariel, the best friend in your head that you never knew that you needed, but you are so glad that you have. Welcome back, friends, to week 3, the final week of Red Lip Theology, where Candace Marie Bimbo has been our fearless leader, where she's been talking to the church girls who've considered tithing to the beauty supply store when Sunday morning isn't enough. And we are finishing her up this week. She has been, I will say this, she has been such a help in terms of the critical thinking that she has provided. Has she also triggered us? Yes, and this week is going to be no different. So the first chapter 8, we're discussing is Black Lace Teddies and Other Pieces I Rock Under the Anointing. Just already like, okay, sis. And this is the highlighter of the skin makeup regimen. Okay, Candace Marie Bimbo is definitely of the thought process that would place her in the space of being a pariah as it pertains to her beliefs around what would be considered okay when it comes down to waiting until marriage for sex, because she notes in chapter 8 that she doesn't necessarily agree, or not even she doesn't necessarily agree, like she does not agree at all. She highlights her journey as one who started in the purity movement in the Baptist church, and she actually progresses it to, or she moves it into the progression of now, and she does so by way of questioning her pastors, questioning her mentors, questioning individuals concerning soul ties and the premise around soul ties. She also talked about how she studied human sexuality and human psychology as well, around like the normalcy of our bodies. And she also talks about how she started getting into the readings of authors and theologians like Monique Moultrie and Jennifer Wright Nust. These are the premises that had her start to question that space for her. And so in these events, they actually started to lead her to her 8 cornerstones of Red Lip Theology that we see on page, or that she highlights on page 134. And her cornerstones are: intimacy is holy. God created us for interdependence and connection. When we honor that, we thrive. Intimacy is necessary. Touch is vital. Sex is healthy, necessary, and productive for reasons beyond reproduction. God respects our agency. Those of us who had the privilege of experiencing physical intimacy should do so as often as we deem necessary for our health, wellness, and desires. And people who identify as asexual and those for whom intimacy can be difficult because of physical and emotional limitations are no less valuable or important than those who experience intimacy privilege. Those are her 8 cornerstone teachings of her theology and the premises that she stands on. She also goes a little bit more in the chapter and talking about how she doesn't really believe that premarital sex is inherently sinful, and that she speaks to the fact that any intentional act that keeps us from flourishing or blocks our light is sinful. Any intimate act that is intentional in blocking our light or keeping us from flourishing is sinful. So she also believes that having sex with someone that doesn't care about you, doesn't serve your highest good or your best self is also sinful. So she thinks that there are ramifications within premarital sex that could cause that intimacy space and that sexual space to be sinful, but premarital sex itself to her is not sin. If you grew up in the church space where premarital sex is a no-no, it's called fornication. You don't do it. And fornication is different from the other sins because you do it against your own self and against your own body. Like, listen, I understand that some of these thoughts and ideologies can be triggering. We are going to get through it. As always, I will give the disclaimer that you are free to disagree with her and the premise of what she feels. I just say disagree respectfully. Obviously, we can have a conversation in the comments about it. But let's not be disrespectful. She said that this is for her. This is how she lives in her best self, and this is how she flourishes. I'm not gonna yuck or yum. I'm just gonna say that I still disagree based off of the premises that I have grown up in. And God bless her on her walk. Okay. She also believes that doctrines around Christians and sex exist because of loyalty to biblical individuals, and those individuals happen to be Paul and David. And she actually highlights it a little bit more on page 137 and 138, where she talks about how Christians tend to love these two men more than they love Jesus Christ. And she asks the question, have you ever noticed how much more we quote David's or Paul's words more than we quote Jesus's words? And she talks about how we take Paul's words as if Jesus said them. And then on page 138, she goes on to say or ask, but why does David, having been a murderer or murderous thought, make me sinful at birth? And she's specifically speaking to the born in sin. I was born in sin. I was shaped in iniquity. David gave that confession after his trifling acts and behaviors as it pertained to Bathsheba, Uriah's wife. So her premise is that him speaking in the space of that particular song of I was born in sin and shaped in iniquity is his premise alone. And so she's asking the question of, well, I didn't do it. I wasn't the one who took Uriah's wife. I wasn't the one who sent him out on the front line. I wasn't the one who saw the woman bathing and out here in the things. So why is it that I have to now take on David's confession as my own when I didn't do what David did? Which I believe that she has a point in asking the question, and why is it that we have to take on the premise of the sins of David if we didn't do what David did? Kind of makes sense. And she also talks about Paul on page 138 as well. She says, I've always believed Paul's overzealousness was his attempt to reckon with the harm of his painful past. Again, Paul being someone who was a Christian or early church killer until the road of Damascus experience, to which he is redeemed. He gives his life to the Lord, and then now he is living for the Lord for the rest of his days. So her point is that because of his own fallen state in the past, that he's actually sat in believing that he is doing service to God until he has a realization and a recognition with God. And God is like, well, but why? Why do you treat me like this? And then there's the shift. Candace's point is that Paul's overzealousness is more so an overzealousness of a redemption kind of situation. If you guys are Marvel, you know, like the MCU, like the Marvel universe and whatnot. If you've seen the Avengers, any of the Avengers where where the Black Widow, yes, Scarlett Johansson is playing the Black Widow, where the Black Widow is out here in the scenes, and she has certain times to actually have conversations with individuals. A lot of times you hear her talk about how she has blood on her ledger and how she's trying to wipe it clean. She talks about how she was really out here in these streets taking off these men's heads. She was out here killing the people, killing the kids, whatever it took, because she was a spy. And she didn't necessarily have a code before she was recruited by Nick Fury. And then she started to change her ways, do things differently. She's no longer, wanting to do things for blood, but she's wanting to do things for the sake of it being right. And if you know anything about Natasha Romanoff, spoiler alert, if you have not seen Avengers Infinity War or Avengers Endgame and you plan to see it, exit. However, I will say this. It's been about 3 to 4 years since those movies came out. If you have not seen them and you talking about I spoiled this for you, you should get over it, because you've had plenty of time to see it. So essentially, I think it's in Infinity War where she and Hawkeye are debating on how to undo the Thanos snap, and they're in this particular, it's almost like they got a series of things that they need to do to kind of redeem the Thanos snap that happened in Infinity War. Endgame is possibly where that happens. So Natasha is debating with Hawkeye. Hawkeye is like, well, somebody got to give a sacrifice. Essentially, it comes to a place where somebody is 2 people there, but somebody got to leave. You got to leave a sacrifice to do the things. So essentially, Natasha at the end, she sacrifices herself. Okay, and that's what she felt was necessary for the redemption of the blood on her ledger, right? Similar thing with Paul. Paul got a lot of blood on his ledger. Candace's theory is that because Paul has a lot of blood on his ledger, Paul became, when he became a Christian, he became overzealous and moved quickly in his overzealousness because of the lot of blood. That is her theories. But she also asked the question of, why do I have to form my faith on the basis of words of trifling men? And again, thinking from earlier in the book, Candace has a really interesting relationship with men as it pertains to her first relationship with her father. So in the space of that, Candace is giving the critical thinking around, why is it that I have to govern myself accordingly by words of men who were also trifling in their spirit? I think she's in a space where she doesn't feel the need to have to live up to these men's standards. I think, to a person's thought process and degree, they could possibly say, well, the words are God breathed and God gave the inspiration around them for them to be written. But again, from her perception, she has ungendered God. So, and that is how she has been able to maintain a relationship with the Lord, but also in this space, that doesn't necessarily mean that she can do that same practice to the men in the scriptures. That was pretty much chapter 8. And I was just like, whew. Candace is out here wanting all the smoke, and she continues to want all the smoke as we continue, because the next chapter 9, is leaving church. And this is lip primer, liner, lip gloss, and lipstick. And so what we see in chapter 9 is Candace giving us the history of her leaving church after the death of her mom. And a lot of that was definitely spurred by the death of her mom. And so she lists her reasonings. She talks about how people tried to tell her how to grieve and what was the appropriate way of grieving. And half of the people telling her this have never been in this space of losing a parent, let alone losing a mother in an untimely way that was unexpected. Okay. The fact that, she talks about the pastor's calloused words, and she highlights them on page 147. And she said specifically, my mama was dead and two men came in their official capacity as pastors into her home to tell me either she was rotting in hell for loving me or she was in heaven getting back the Coke bottle figure she had before I ruined it. And I read that section and I was just like, she deserves so much better than those pastors. Like, I can't even begin to imagine that space that she's in. She's burying her mother, which is a societal expectation, but it's early. Like, she had a promising future. She was working on her own dissertation, getting ready to present it, and working on her doctorate degree of her PhD. And that was Candace's mom. And Candace was also working on her own PhD, but to know that they're working on this together, and the fact that there were still so many things that Candace felt that was promising for her mother and her mother's future. Like, Candace hasn't been married yet. Candace hasn't, given her grandbabies and other stuff, like just other things that her mother probably had purpose to do, like actually using her PhD degree for the good of why she studied her particular program in the first place. The fact that she was such a devout server in the ministry and the churches that she was a part of. So I think that to have pastors come to the house in which was your sanctum and which brought you great joy and great peace throughout your life, and also told the history of your story and the connection to your mother, to have two pastors in their official capacity come back and they are talking about, well, she's probably going to rot in hell because she never asked for forgiveness from the church, and she never stood up in front of the church basically to say that the baby was a sin, or just the history. Y'all know what I'm talking about. When the people were out here fornicating, they have the mother go up. Sometimes they'll add the dad on, but maybe not. That whole thing. And he was talking about that the reason that because she didn't do that, she's probably going to be in hell. And then the other pastor saying, well, no, she'll probably have a glorified body, but it'll be the body she had prior to her having you. Whoa, disrespectful. She deserved so much more than what she got. And I think that that's the unfortunate part of sometimes being in a space of a body where there are many parts and many members, and everybody is not walking in a space of just thinking before words leave their lips and the weight of the words that they carry. So I did, at that moment where I read that on page 147 in my head and in my heart, and I'm sure I probably said out loud because I am an emotional reader, I said, like, she deserves so much more than what those pastors gave her. And that's unfortunate because that will forever be a pivotal moment in her life that she will take with her forever because it's tied to and associated with her mother's death. And number 3, the reason being the inability to be honest about how sad and painful the loss of her mother was, because again, she's in spaces where people are uncomfortable with her expressing her grief, her sadness, and her pain, and the fact that she's not expressing it in a way that's comfortable for the people around her to feel okay. The fact of the matter is that death is something that something that our society should probably be more familiar with and more comfortable with than we are. And for some reason, I don't understand why we don't have like a death preparation or death care type of space for I don't know, either under mental health or under like a church board situation or what have you. But the fact that we don't have that, and the fact that we want to tell people how to grieve, and we also want to rush them through a grieving process, is definitely unacceptable, and it's annoying. And that's just me being honest. I think that in the space that, churches a lot of times will take on, and pastors will a lot of times take on, a funeral task of eulogizing bodies and things of that nature, and doesn't have, just like individuals who are LMFTs with specialties in grief to help out, like counselors or therapists or anything like that serve in the ministry. The fact that they don't have that, or that partner with the ministry, is wild to me, especially in like a 2022. At this point, we do need to kind of step it up, and we do need to do better as a body, because grief is something that people endure, and but for having that space for transitional periods through grief, where is comfort? Where is the compassion? Where is the being your brother or your sister's keeper? So because of her experience with people telling her how to grieve, with the callousness of pastors, and her feeling of having an inability to be honest about the grief that she's going through, she stepped away from the church and she got therapy. And in the space of speaking with her therapist, in the space of therapy, she talks about, and she acknowledged that therapy gave the aspect that the church was something shared between her and her mother, which is why a lot of times when she would go to church, she would feel a level and a semblance of pain, because that was a shared space with her and her mom. Her mom introduced her to church. Her mom introduced her to Jesus. So that's going to be, a pain point for her, if you will. And then church also gave space, or therapy for her gave space to work through her stuff with preachers, and just how they've fallen short in areas where she felt like they should have been better throughout her years. So some of the church hurt that she has, some of the hurt from the preachers that she's encountered, that she thought, and pastors that she thought was for her. She specifically lists a specific pastor who she was in the hospital, and I think it was after she had like a mental break around, shortly after her mother's death. And the pastor literally texted the group and said that she's on her way and she never came. And so I think that, therapy gave her the space, as she talked about, to really work through some of that hurt, and the expectations around the preachers and the pastors, and what she thought that they were supposed to do in particular circumstances and situations concerning her. And then she in therapy, she also talked about how staying home but attending therapy, she talks about how like womanist theology kind of validated her experience that she was enduring of pain, tolerance of pain, the experience of Black women in general. And then also she also talks about how healing from specific encounters allowed her not to hate God any longer, and to move on from terrible deeds done by pastors. So the space of kind of walking away from church kind of moved away from the pain that she initially shared, because this was a shared space with her mother. And it also branched out and gave her a space for healing as it pertained to her hating God. Her ability to step away from church and really, just kind of speak with her therapist really gave her the space that she needed to kind of heal from some of those things, and to really have open and honest dialogue and conversations with her Lord and Savior, and her God of all gods and Lord of all lords, to really speak to, the detriments of how she felt like he failed her. She also stated that with walking away from church, she was now free to go on a spiritual journey and explore some of the things that, that if you was in church, you can't do. Child, it's so much. Everything is of the devil. Don't do it. And depending on which church you are part of, which church body that you're a part of, what denomination and things like that. Because, back in the day, it was, can't go to the movie theaters, can't go to the skating rink, can't play cards, can't wear makeup, can't wear form-fitting clothes. Holiness is right, and that's pretty much it. Like, this right here, you're sinning your shoulders out and you're sinning. Like, so to know that she's now in this space where she's like, I want to try the things. And so she does. On her spiritual journey, she explores things like there being no hell. She doesn't believe in hell now. And she doesn't believe that Jesus is the only path to God. And and she also feels that she doesn't have to share her type of Christianity and her belief system with white people. Because again, in her previous chapter, she talked about how white people can't be trusted, and that is just her experience. So she started attending Buddhist gatherings, and she started studying African traditions and African traditional religions. And so she started asking herself questions like, who would I be without the church? Because church has been such a grave part of, or such an embedded part of her identity for so long, that she is now in a space where she's like, well, what do I do? How do I maneuver? And she's in a space, based off of what I read in the book, she's in a space where she's figuring it out, where she's, but she's also exploring. And so for the believers in the back who feel as though I should not be, kind of admonishing the things that she says concerning, the exploration of her spiritual journey, let me just take a pause, and I'm a admonish you right now to lean in. Come on, saints, to lean in. Because I hear your thoughts. And here's what I have to say to you. Philippians 2:12. Just as I said last week, I will say it again. It is up to me to mind my business, work out my own soul salvation with fear and trembling. This young lady has stated that she is in a space where she has a safe circle of individuals that hold her accountable, that she is open to receiving accountability from. And so in this space, what I am doing, I am just reviewing the book and giving you the information as she has written it. That is all I'm doing in this space, friend. And that's all you're going to get. Now, in terms of, do I agree fully with her belief systems? No. Can I point to a specific scripture that could possibly dismantle a few of those things that I just mentioned? Yes. Am I going to do so? No, because I am reviewing a book. That is it. That is all. If you wanted a Bible study, this was not the channel for that. Now, I'm not saying that we can't have a moment and somebody can preach a word and then go send a tithe and offering to your local church on a Sunday morning, but that is just not the moment. Okay, friends? All right, cool. Now, going on to chapter 10, Psalm 90, verse 12. And in this chapter, she speaks to moving from having one pastor and leader, as I just highlighted, and how she thinks that it would be beneficial to having a spiritual care squad, which allows for multiple people to honor the totality of your being and to have authority to hold you accountable with your permission. So basically what I took from this, and this is why I highlighted what I said just at the end of chapter 9. Candace has enlisted her spiritual care squad. those individuals who she knows and who can hold her accountable in her journey. Okay, so there's not to say that there are individuals who are sharing thoughts, experiences, and telling her, hey, sis, okay, now you done gone too far. Reel it in. But what I will say is that I do agree with her in terms of not necessarily just setting yourself up with one particular leader, one particular counsel, one particular therapist, or what have you, because you as a totality of a human being, from my own thought process, you're made of 3 parts anyway. You are a being that has you are a spirit that has a soul that lives in a body. That's 3 entities right there. And there are minds, wills, emotions, imaginations, and other things that pile into that. And to say that you are only going to have one person speaking into your life for the remainder of your life is unrealistic. So I do agree with Candace Bimbo in this space of having a spiritual care squad to kind of decentralize the power around your being and to share some responsibility and voice. And you have multiple corners of accountability that people can hold you to, but also you can permit these individuals to give you that space or to hold you to that standard that you're looking for. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I thought that it was very profound the way that she said it. And I was like, let me start thinking about a spiritual care squad that I can have and who would be on it, honestly. And so I will posit that question to you, friends. Who, and if you want to leave the comments in the comment section below, by all means do so. But the question is, who, if you had a spiritual care squad of about 5 or 6 members, who would you actually put on your spiritual care squad and why? So moving on to the end of chapter 10, like she talks about the lessons of like self-care, setting boundaries, doing your best, and that equaling to you operating on wisdom. And so like she really just kind of ties that chapter up in a nutshell after that. And I thought that it was brilliantly written, honestly. And then we move on to the conclusion. And so I will just kind of sum the conclusion up in a few words, saying that this was a beautiful, heartfelt letter to her mother. The things that she still is sad about or gets sad about, the things that she wished she could have done, how she wished she was there for her mother, how she wished she would have not been so mean, listened to her a little bit more, taken her wisdom earlier on, and things of that nature, and taking on the lessons that her mother wanted her to learn. But she is actually in the space of now practicing these things. I thought it was just beautiful. It was heartfelt. It was very vulnerable, and I definitely appreciated it for that. She really just poured her heart out, and I was just like, this is, whew. I caught myself a couple of times like, girl, you can't cry at this. But you know, I believe I did. If I am being honest, I did shed a couple of tears because I was just like, this is so heartfelt, and you can really see her heart in this particular letter. And that was pretty much the basis of the conclusion. And so alrighty, friends, we have officially finished Red Lip Theology by Candace Marie Bimbo. All right, so let's do some, let's work through some of the logistics of what's going to happen in the next upcoming week. Obviously, The Light We Carry is coming out in like a few days, right? And I've already pre-ordered the things. I've pre-ordered the book and I've pre-ordered the audiobook. Like over here, this is not a game. So my hope is that I will get the book. I can go through it. I can map it out. And on the first video of me going over the things, I can share those things with you. Anyway, once we get the book, we're gonna jump right in. We're gonna dive in. We're gonna go over the things, and we're gonna see what our illustrious forever First Lady has to say for us, and the things and the jewels and just everything that we can take away from it. Okay, guys. So until next time, Saints and Ain'ts, I'll be seeing you. Okay? Bye.